By the way, if you need more copies of these, I have some extras here, because we can run off as many copies of these as we want on the copy machine there. But there's the brazen altar, and there's the laver, and there's this chart of all of the 5 feasts, and you can have some of these extras if you need them. Where is it? No, you took it. You wiped it off. You dropped it and had to wipe it off. She must have just left it in there. Of course, we're looking at the tabernacle now. And the brazen altar was salvation, then moved on to the brazen laver, which is sanctification. And so we would pause for a couple of Wednesday nights just to look at the matter of sanctification. I have to race this board on Sunday mornings because I use it for Sunday mornings. And so we saw that the Greek word for sanctification is hagios, mos, and it's the very same word for sanctification and for holiness. The same word is translated both. The only difference in the ideas is the sanctification, as I said, is the process, and the holiness is the result. But it's the same word, and anytime you come across sanctification in the New Testament, you can put holiness. Anytime you come to holiness, you can put sanctification, because they'll both be the Greek word hagios mos. And we were looking. There are 2 areas to sanctification. Number 1, and you can read this in your fundamentals of faith, in the 16 fundamentals of faith of the Assemblies of God. Sanctification is one of those 16 fundamentals, and it lists there the 2 parts of sanctification are, number 1, separation, and number 2, dedication. Now, very few people ever think of sanctification or holiness in any other way except the separation. The dedication part, they totally don't even, and yet it's stated in our fundamentals of faith. But as we get to it, it's going to add a new dimension, I think, to some of you. The idea of sanctification, that sanctification is not merely a separation. But since we're going to get to that later, I want to raise it right now because I'll be wanting to use this part of the board here. And we're looking at sanctification. Let's read again 2 Corinthians 7 and 1. Therefore, having these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit. So in separation, we've got 2 categories. Separation that involves the flesh, and separation that involves our spirit. And again, first of all, when we think of separation, most people sanctification and holiness, most people only think of a separation. They don't think of dedication as part of it. We'll get to that later. Then in separation, practically all the time in holiness, people are thinking simply from the flesh. They never think from the standpoint of the spirit as being part of sanctification. But he says, cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit. And I'll get to that a little later, the things involved there. But I'm just now writing this down from last week. If I had a third board, I could leave the Sunday school lesson on it, but I don't have the 2 here. And of course, the flesh, when we talk about the flesh, there are 2 things that really come into focus. Number 1, the outward appearance, which we were discussing. Number 2, a social life. Outward appearance and our social life. And we had gotten to both of those last week. And the outward appearance and the social life, of course, our entertainment, where we should go, and etc. And I have pages of notes on sanctification at home. Some of these sometimes I'm thinking I wish I'd brought some of them, but if I did, I'd have a whole sheaf. But I just brought 2 sets right here that I've been using here on Wednesday nights. 2 sheets, it is, out of the whole bunch. But now, since we sort of looked at that last Wednesday night, separation from the flesh, and of course, there are two words that I usually leave with folks. To the ladies, the word modest. Are you modest? And to the men, effeminate. Or do you dress like a man? And the word effeminate means be wearer of soft clothing. In other words, having the frills and laces and things. A man wearing frills and laces like a woman would be normally wearing. In other words, a woman be a woman and a man be a man. And that's the idea in outward prayer. Then the social life is where we should go and where we shouldn't go, what we should participate in, and that would include also television, what we should look at and what we shouldn't, and who should we associate with and who we shouldn't, etc. And we can go into that for length of time. But this evening now, I want to look into separation of the Spirit, In Romans 1 and 9, because this is a part of sanctification that is almost absolutely, totally ignored. Romans 1 and 9, Paul says, "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit." Whom I serve with my spirit. I want you to go to 1 Timothy then, chapter 4. 1 Timothy chapter 4, and we'll look at verse 12. And this is to young people. "Let no one despise your youth." I've used this all over the nation, talking to young people. "But be an example to the believers in word," the way you talk, "in conduct, your daily life, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity." Now let's go to 1 Peter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3. And I believe it's verses 3 and 4. And I read that the other night speaking to lady. And here he makes a contrast. "Do not let your adornment be merely outward." Now I'm reading exactly like it would have been in the Greek. "Be merely outward, arranging the hair, wearing gold, or putting on fine apparel." Now he's not condemning them, but he said don't let that be your prime priority. "Rather let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the incorruptible beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in the sight of God." Now what Paul is saying, believe it or not, of these two things involved in separation, even though when we think of sanctification, 98 times out of 100, almost 100 times out of 100, when you talk about sanctification, people think of the flesh only. And according to Paul and to Peter and to John, separation in the spirit is more important than separation in the flesh. But we never think of that. We never think of that at all. It's just something that we never seem to take into consideration. I want to look at a couple, if I have it here, and yes. In 2 Corinthians 7 and 1, where it said, "Let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit." I want to look at those two words right there, because the word cleanse, katharizo, that, by the way, is where we get our English word cathartic. Cathartic. And that's what it really means in the Greek, a catharsis. You know what a catharsis is? Yeah, it's castor oil, for instance. The word's a purgative. let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness. And the word filthiness, molismos, yeah, not too plain, simply means soiling. These are words in the dictionary, that is the Greek dictionary. Our defilement. That's not writing too good right there. This is a new one too I got tonight. I got a brand new one. Maybe better go back to the old one, but I'll throw it away. Soiling or defilement. Now what he's saying here, not only in the flesh, but in the spirit, you need to cleanse those things out of your spirit which is defiling. The things out of your spirit that's defiling, get them out just like you take cast. You know, when I was a little boy, every spring, all the kids I knew had to take a big dose of castor oil, and they claimed it was cleansing out their body from things that accrued during the winter. But my mother wasn't a believer in medicine. Thank the Lord for that part. And do you know that I have never tasted castor oil? I have no idea what it tastes like. I never did get a cathartic given to me as a kid. I guess I never needed cleansing out after winter. Maybe my mother thought that I never let stop long enough to get defiled. But anyhow, I never was. But in other words, and you know, I've seen some folks in Pentecost. You know, you talk about sometimes the body needs a cathartic. I've seen some folks in Pentecost that their spirits need a cathartic. They need to get rid of some pollutions of the spirit. Well, that's what it's really saying. Cleanse yourself from all defilement of the flesh and of the spirit. But why did we never think of that as a part of sanctification? Because people can, I'm telling you, they can look, and I don't mean this in the critical sense, I'm just flat stating a fact. One of the groups today that are so, they're trying to make holiness, and I'm sure not casting off on holiness, because the Bible calls holiness beautiful. It speaks of the beauty of holiness. But one of the groups today who drill into as much as any, I guess, are the apostolics, the Jesus only folks. And yet, they have some of the meanest spirits I've ever seen in my life as a movement. They're everywhere you see these, and I know they're not all that way, but as a general, you see the apostolic, the women will have their hair piled up almost like a haystack on their heads. They'll have their dress sleeves and they'll have their dresses down to their ankles, and they'll have their phone in their face. Bless God, the whole bunch of us going to hell except me. That's their attitude. A filthy spirit. And I want you to know you can dress up your outside all you want to, which is what they do. And yet, 9 tenths of them that I've been around have an absolute nasty spirit. Now, he said you've got to cleanse yourself from the defiling of spirits as well. And in fact, I'd like to read Colossians chapter 3. But Colossians chapter 3. And I'll tell you folks, if we could get rid of a lot of people's stinking spirits, we'd have a lot less trouble sometimes in churches. Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 to 7. Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, that is that don't mean kill other folks in the church, that means your own self. Fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. And then drop down, and then let's read verses 8 to 10. But now, you yourselves, it says, are to put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. And then let's read verses 12 to 16. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another. Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. Did you know every bit of that is mostly is concerned with sins of the Spirit? Sins of the Spirit. I want you to turn to Romans 1. Romans 1. And we have in Romans 1 what we call the catalog of sin. It starts in verse 28. Now, I want to illustrate this, and I want two fellows, kind of tall fellows, Keith and Mike. You come up here at the front with me, if you will. I'm going to do some illustrating right here. And you can stand over here, and you can stand over here. Now, you're going to be the flesh, and he's going to be the spirit, human spirit. Now, let's read the catalog of sin. Being filled with all unrighteousness. Of course, that's the general term. Sexual immorality. That's the sin of the flesh. Hold up one finger, will you? Sexual immorality. Wickedness. That'll be another sin of the flesh. Hold up another finger, if you will. All right. Covetousness. That's a sin of the spirit. Hold up a finger. Maliciousness. That's a sin of the spirit. Hold up another finger. Full of envy. That's a sin of the spirit. Hold up another finger. Murder. We can call that a sin of the flesh. Hold up a finger over there. Strife. That's a sin of the spirit. Hold up a finger. Deceit. The spirit. Evil-mindedness. Whispers. That's a spirit thing. Whispers. Sin of the spirit. Backbiters. That's another one. Haters of God. How many fingers you got left? No. Violent. Let's call that a sin of the flesh. Hold up another finger. Brother, what's your name right here? You can join him with, because he only got 10 fingers. He already used all of them. Brother Flores, you go up here and join him, will you? I said violent. We could call that a sin of the flesh, all right. Then he said proud. Hold up a finger, brother. That's a sin of the spirit, of the human spirit. Boasters, that's another. Hold up a finger. Inventors of evil things. Hold up another one. Disobedient to parents. Hold up another one. Undiscerning. Hold up another one. Untrustworthy. Hold up another one. Unloving. Hold up another one. Unforgiving. Hold up another one. Unmerciful. Hold up another one. You've held up 9, haven't you? Out of the sins of the catalog of sins, 4 of them relate to the flesh, and 19 relate to the spirit. And yet, when you talk about holiness, all we hear is about the flesh. That's so now you can go sit down if your wife will let you. Yeah. See, I knew that I got you for that because I knew you'd have a shorter bunch and I knew you couldn't count very high. Now that's a nasty spirit wanting to make a statement like this. Now let's look at this just for a moment. How many people, if I'm going ahead and use Keith again. How many people, if it got through the church, Keith had, while she was out of town because her dad's ill, and so she had to suddenly go by herself. She got around to Sir Keith, picked up a prostitute, and spent the night in a hotel with her. I want you to know, brother, would there be something going? But somebody, huh? But how many people can sit on church benches and have a proud spirit and have a whisperer, backbiter, can have envy, and nobody says a word about it? And according to the Bible, one's just as bad as the other. The person that comes to church and has been backbiting, talking about someone behind their back, is as guilty before God as a man who spent the night in a motel with a prostitute. But yet we never give any thought to cleansing our spirits. It's always just the flesh. And in fact, did you know the one sin that the Bible seems to put at the top of the list of the sins are people who will cause divisions in churches? According to the Bible, that seems to be the number one sin in the world. People who will get in a church and start a whisper campaign and cause schisms among the brethren. The Bible lists that as the very worst sin. That's worse in God's sight than adultery. It's worse than murder. And yet it just kind of bothers me that people can just hate somebody and it just goes okay. That's fine. But if somebody goes out and gets drunk, oh, brother. Ooh. Well, according to the Bible, if you want to make accordances, a person sitting in the church with hate in their heart is committing a worse sin than the guy that went out and got drunk. And just always remember that now, in the catalog of sin, only 4 sins of the Spirit were named, and 19 of them were sins of the Spirit. Sins of the flesh. Only 4 sins of the flesh were named, and 19 sins of the Spirit. And so, no wonder the Bible says to cleanse ourselves from filthiness of the flesh and of the Spirit. And I want you to know, now you can look as old-fashioned as Abraham Lincoln, or as old-fashioned as Grandma Moses, whichever you be, a man or woman. But you have these sins of the Spirit in your heart, according to God, you're worse off than anybody. And that's the reason we kind of get ourselves all mixed up about some of these things. We just we don't stop to think about what is really involved here, and the sins of the Spirit. And that brings us then the matter of separation. And then sometimes I think we need to preach more on the sins of the Spirit, because all we hear is about the sins of the flesh. But it never ceases to amaze, as many years as I've been in the gospel, how people can claim to be filled with the Spirit, saved and filled with the Spirit, and have a nasty spirit. Brother Filbert, by the way, I had a great regard for Brother Filbert, and Betty Langston was at that time, she's Zimmerman now, but at that time she was a young lady like I was a young guy. And before, the girl that preceded you was Betty McKinney on the piano. If there ever was a man who came down on what he called holiness, it was Brother Filbert. In fact, to him it was a sin. He preached a sin to go on vacation. He preached a sin to have a Christmas tree. He went right down the low. But you know, Betty McKinney was our piano player, and she came look like, man, she had jewelry, she had makeup, she had red lips, she had jewelry, she had earrings. She came and she played the piano. And somebody got to, well, Brother Philip, how can you preach holiness when there you got Betty McKinney on the piano stool, looking like a fashion plate, bejeweled and painted. And what he said, he didn't mean that he approved of that. That's not the idea. But you know what he told some folks? He said it publicly one time. No, not public, but to a group of people. It was almost because it was quite a group of people. He said, holiness is more than how you look. He said, I don't appreciate how she dresses. I don't appreciate her makeup and her jewelry, but he says, do you know that's one of the most faithful young people? He said, every time these church doors open, I know Betty's going to be on that piano stool. And he said, to me, that's holiness too. And I remember that through the years. Well, eventually Betty replaced her, and you know Betty, of course, she all had a problem with her worldliness, you know. Like it did me. Well, she eventually replaced her, and then through the years, Betty was the piano player. And the two Bettys, I just now thought two Bettys, Betty McKinney, then Betty Langston, you became Betty Zimmerman. But, and then she replaced her through the years. But I remember what he said. There's more to holiness than how you look. That's how he started off that conference. And he said, there's one thing about Betty McKinney's. And he said, I don't appreciate her doing it. I wish she'd quit. But he said she is as faithful as the sun can be. That comes down to the dedication part we're going to get to secondly. We're not going to tonight. But there are a lot of more things to holiness than how you look. There's a whole lot more to holiness than where you do go or don't go. Holiness also includes your spirit. Proud, boasters, backbiters, envy, that's also holiness. And the Bible ranks that right along with murder and adultery and fornication. Right along. It's the same kind of sin in God's sight. The person who has a bitterness in their heart to somebody, a bitterness who just don't like somebody, doesn't have any more chance of getting to heaven as a man who's going out and picking up prostitutes. So it's just, you see, we need to kind of dwell on that matter a lot of times, and what holiness in the spirit is, as well as holiness in the flesh. Now, as I said, the second part of holiness now, and the part that we never seem to think about, has to do with what he said about Betty McKinney. The second part of holiness, and that's listed right in the Assemblies of God doc, is dedication. Holiness, hagiosmos, sanctification, means separation from something, and dedication to something. But we're not going to start that tonight. We're going to take that up next Wednesday night. We're going to take up the part of holiness that is dedication. I want to tell you, I'll just say this much ahead of time. These people, and we've got some right here now that can use any little excuse that comes along to miss church, is as far from sanctification as the guy who commits adultery. Holiness is separation from, and it's dedication to. And the more holiness I have, the more dedicated I am to what I'm supposed to do for God. Amen. We're going to stop at that point tonight, though. You gotta, what would be a chorus from that? That's a good one. I'll tell you the best thing I ever did do. I'll tell you the best thing I ever did do. I'll tell you the best thing I ever did do. I put on the old robe and put on the new. The old robe was dirty, all tattered and torn. The new robe was spotless, had never been worn. I'll tell you the best thing I ever did do. I took off the old robe and put on the new. Glory. I see some of you didn't know that. Amen. Well, some of you are not as old as my wife and Betty is. Okay, you can stand. Oh, I met you two girls right back there. See you. Amen. Word of God. You know, I'd like to resurrect some of those old times, those courses, so resurrection began. I had a whole list of them, and somebody stole it. No, they didn't steal it, they just got too off, forgot to bring it back. And I don't know where it went. Amen. All right, we're going to be dismissed. And next Wednesday night, we'll take up the matter of dedication, separation and dedication, or sanctification. All right.